Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. In this video, we're going to take a look at the Ioptron HAE69C EC mount, which is a relatively recent harmonic mount with a high payload capacity and an absolute encoder in right ascension. I'll put a link to this product in the description below if you want to check it out. I've wanted to review this mount ever since it was announced by Ioptron because I am considering it as a potential upgrade from my trusty CEM70. Also, there have been dozens and dozens of reviews of the ZW-AM5 published on the internet, but very few reviews of Ioptron harmonic mounts, which is too bad because ZW's stronghold on the harmonic mount market has stifled competition, which is not a good thing for us consumers. So in this video, I will describe what my ideal astrophotography telescope mount could look like, and I hope that mount manufacturers will consider some of my criteria in the design of their future products. Obviously, these requirements are going to be highly personal, and they may not match yours because they really depend on your equipment, your experience level, your budget, whether or not you need to set up and tear down every night, etc. At the same time, we'll take a closer look at the characteristics and features of this particular mount, and you'll understand why I was so interested in reviewing it. In the next video, which will be out in a few weeks, I will do a thorough review of this mount's performance when used with my ASCAR 151 PHQ refractor under the night sky. Sounds exciting? Then let's get started. First, a quick disclaimer. I'm an Agena Astro affiliate, and I contacted them to review this mount. They were gracious enough to let me borrow it, free of charge, for up to 60 days, and for the purpose of this review. But as you would expect, I have full editorial control over the content of this video, so you will get a perfectly honest and transparent review. Regardless, I wanted to thank Agena Astro and Ioptron for letting me test this new mount. Once the review is over, I can decide to either return it to Agena Astro at their expense or purchase it. Other than that, I am not being compensated in any shape or form by either Agena Astro or Ioptron to produce this video. Alright, let's talk about what my ideal mount could look like, and let's see how the Ioptron HAE69C EC mount stacks up. I came up with a set of requirements that fits the way I practice this hobby and the equipment I like to use. Let's start with the payload capacity. My OTA, the ASCAR 151 PHQ, which I've reviewed on the channel before, with all of the imaging equipment I use, can weigh as much as 40 to 45 pounds. And with a little bit of extra legroom, a payload capacity of roughly 70 pounds should be sufficient for astrophotography. That is the advertised payload capacity of the Ioptron CEM70, as its name suggests. And it is one of the reasons I purchased that mount back in 2020. The Ioptron HAE69 mount has an advertised payload capacity of 69 pounds without counterweight, and a staggering 79-pound capacity with a 10-pound counterweight, which should be more than sufficient for my needs. There are plenty of mounts on the market with a similar payload capacity. For example, the Losmandy G11 has an advertised payload capacity of 60 pounds. However, that mount weighs a hefty 33 pounds, which gives it a payload to mount weight ratio of 1.8. On the other hand, the Ioptron CEM70, thanks to its unique design, weighs only 30 pounds, but has a payload capacity of 70 pounds, which gives it a payload to mount weight ratio of 2.3. Like all of you, I'm not getting any younger, and carrying such a heavy mount is only going to get more difficult in the coming years. So a key requirement is to have a mount that is as lightweight as possible and with as high a payload to mount weight ratio as possible. The Ioptron HAE69 mount weighs only 20 pounds, which means that it is easy, at least for me, to carry around, and that gives it a truly amazing and industry-leading payload to mount weight ratio of 3.5. And being able to use the mount without a counterweight is a strong plus, especially when using it with a smaller OTA. The mount ships in a sturdy carrying case, filled with high-density foam. It is comparable to the carrying case that came with the CEM70, only a little smaller. It is 15 inches long, 13 inches wide, and 8 inches tall. This is a great little carrying case that makes it easy to transport the mount, and it will do a great job protecting your investment. Backlash is annoying and can be detrimental to guiding accuracy. It can be compensated to some extent in PhD2, but my experience is that even PhD2 cannot get it perfectly right, and sometimes applies a correction that is either too large or too small. Anyway, my CEM70, thanks to its spring-loaded worm gears, has fairly little backlash, and that is yet another reason why I chose that mount when I got started in astrophotography. I do use declination backlash compensation in PhD2, and it helps to compensate for whatever little backlash there is. But wouldn't it be great if the mount had no backlash at all? Well, thanks to its dual strain wave gearing, the Ioptron HAE69 mount has virtually no backlash on either axis, which means that it should allow for very accurate guiding, at least in theory. This is obviously something that we will test for in the next video. Periodic error is usually not a huge deal, even if it is relatively large, as long as it is fairly smooth without any steep section. My CEM70 has a peak-to-peak periodic error of about 10 arcseconds, which is out of spec, but reasonable. However, it has one steep section, and this requires me to use guide exposures as short as 1 second. This can be a problem because with such short exposures, especially when using an OAG and a long focal length telescope during galaxy season, you may not be able to find guide stars with a high enough signal-to-noise ratio to guide reliably. PhD2's PPEC algorithm definitely helps, but even that is not bulletproof. The other minor reason why periodic error can be a problem is that it can degrade the quality of the calibration that PhD2 has to do before you can guide. I have noticed this many times. It does not seem to cause too much trouble, but in the end, wouldn't it just be nice to not have to deal with periodic error at all? Well, thanks to its high-resolution absolute encoder in right ascension, the Ioptron HAE69C EC mount has virtually no periodic error. The mount shipped with a PE report, and it is basically a flat graph, with an average deviation of about 0.15 arcsecond. Of course, we will verify this in the next video. But if it is true, it definitely opens the door to short unguided exposures, at least with short to medium focal length telescopes. And we will certainly test that as well. Through the mount cabling is a really nice feature, because with a mini PC riding on top of the OTA, you never have to fear cable snags, which usually happen in the middle of the night during a meridian flip while you're sleeping. My CEM70 has that feature for both power and USB. However, the USB hub never worked reliably on my mount, so I simply inserted a thin USB 2.0 cable through the mount, and it's been working fairly well for me. But I would love to have a mount with a simpler and cleaner design. All I really want is a DC port on the base to power the mount and to bring power to a DC port located on the saddle. And I want a USB port, ideally a Type-C port, on the saddle to control the mount. That's it. It should be as simple as that, because in this case, simplicity translates into reliability, which is essential for an astrophotography mount, especially if you want to operate it remotely. Well, the through-the-mount cabling of the Ioptron HAE69C EC mount is spot on, and pretty much exactly what I just described. It is simple and it works reliably, at least in my cursory tests, so I think this is great. I did have to use an angled adapter for the power cable to make sure that it does not interfere with the telescope, but other than that, I think this is as good as it gets. Note that the USB cabling and hub inside the mount is USB 2. While I don't personally care about that, I don't understand why Ioptron did not implement USB 3 inside the mount. maybe something to improve in the next iteration. I have to say that I've been spoiled with my CEM70 because it has an integrated iPolar, and that makes polar alignment a breeze. It works very well. So this is something I'd love to have in my ideal mount. The Ioptron HAE69C EC mount does not have an integrated iPolar, although you can mount one to the bubble level if you'd like. It's just one additional piece of equipment you need to carry around, but it's doable. If I decide to keep this mount, I will probably just use Nina's awesome 3-point polar alignment plugin, which has proven to be very accurate and reliable whenever I've used it in the past. Also, with that plugin, you don't need a clear view to the north to do your polar alignment, which is convenient if your neighbor's trees are in the way. While I do mostly astrophotography, I occasionally enjoy doing visual observing, especially with family and friends, because it's a lot of fun to share the direct experience of the night sky through an eyepiece, especially when looking at the moon or the planets. Unfortunately, equatorial mounts can put the eyepiece at awkward positions, and they're just not very comfortable for visual observing. So a mount that could be used in either equatorial or Altaz would be perfect. And in Altaz mode, a little hand controller coupled with a simple and accurate alignment procedure can make the experience all the more enjoyable. Well, the Ioptron HAE69C EC mount can be used in either mode. I have not tested it yet, but I will show you how it works in the next video. When you spend a large amount of money on a mount, you want to know that the company stands behind its product by offering a great warranty and excellent customer support. The Ioptron HAE69C EC mount, just like the CEM70 and pretty much all of their mounts, has a 2-year warranty, which I feel is adequate because if something is wrong with your sample, having 2 years to find out about it is plenty of time. Also, Ioptron does provide you with the ability to purchase an extended warranty when you buy one of their mounts. And as far as Ioptron's customer support, my experience with them over the last few years has been pretty good. It was a little harder to get a hold of them during the COVID-19 pandemic, but even during that time, they were able to help me troubleshoot an issue I was having with my iPolar. More recently, I have sent them a couple of inquiries, and they were quick to respond to my email, and were very helpful. I know that this is just a sample of one, and I have read both good and bad reports about their customer service in various forums. I can't really comment on those. All I can say with certainty is that my experience with Ioptron's customer support has been fairly good. That's all. Maybe I'm a dreamer, but I would love it if a company that manufactures telescope mounts made the schematics of their electronic control boards, their firmware, and their ASCOM and Indy driver open source. Not only would that allow them to make a big PR splash and gain a lot of street cred among the amateur astronomy community, they could also benefit from external contributors and get bugs fixed or enhancements implemented much faster than with a closed ecosystem. Additionally, it would give people some confidence that even if the company were to go belly up, they might be able to get someone to repair the electronics, which seems to be the weakest link in modern mounts. Another option would be to use and also contribute to the OnStep project, which is already open source. If someone at Ioptron is watching this video, maybe they can consider this. This kind of move would make them pioneers in the amateur astronomy community, and I, for one, would be delighted to see this. I would like a mount that is easy and quick to set up. This is especially important if you need to set up and tear down every night. I am lucky in that I can leave my equipment for days on end in my backyard, but I also occasionally go to local state and national parks where I need to set up and tear down every night. My CEM70 is not particularly great in that regard, primarily because of the way it attaches to the pier. If you own a CEM70, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And I'd love to have a mount that can be set up a little bit more quickly. The Ioptron HAE69C EC mount is a little bit easier and quicker to set up than my CEM70, partly thanks to the design of its base and the location of the bolts that attach the mount head to the tripod. I would like a mount that is silent when slewing, like the Warpastron WD-20 mount that Cuivre de Lazygeek reviewed a few months ago. I'll put a link to that video in the description below. I often image from my backyard, and in summer when we sleep with the window open, I can hear my CEM70 mount in the middle of the night while it's doing its meridian flip. Again, not a huge deal, but a silent drive would be a nice little bonus. Well, my early tests of the Ioptron HAE69C EC mount seem to indicate that it basically sounds the same as my CEM70. I also noticed that the deck axis of my sample makes a strange and very loud sound while slewing when it is in a very specific orientation. I reached out to Ioptron support about that, and they instructed me to loosen the deck axis belt ever so slightly, which I did, and that resolved the issue. I really like the center balance design of my CEM70 because the entire weight of the mount and OTA is located exactly in line with the tripod, or in my case, the tri-pier, which means that such a design is naturally stable and unlikely to tip over. Also, the top plate, which holds the mount, is only subjected to a vertical force, so it does not need to be very beefy, because the force is simply transferred directly to the column, and when you see how the top plate of the tri-pier is attached to the column with 4 tiny screws, you can understand why this might be a concern. The Ioptron HAE69 series of mounts have a more traditional design, which means that the weight of the equipment is slightly offset towards the north. This is not a huge deal, but again, something that mount manufacturers may want to think about for future versions of their products. Another feature that I liked on my CEM70 when I first started using it was the GPS receiver integrated into the mount. It made setting up the location and time easy and accurate. Unfortunately, since then, it has become rather unreliable, so at this point I no longer depend on it. I sync the time from my PC and I enter the coordinates manually whenever I go to a different location. My opinion is that if a GPS receiver is integrated into the mount, it must be reliable. Otherwise, there is no point in including that feature. The mounts in the HAE69 series do not have an integrated GPS, but like I said, I don't think it's such a big deal. And finally, one minor cosmetic thing. Many of the parts of the CEM70 are cast aluminum parts, and the powder-coated paint that's applied to it may not have baked long enough. It easily peels off, and generally does not look all that great. On the other hand, all the parts of the HAE69 mount are machined aluminum, and the paint, or maybe it's anodized, I'm not sure, looks to be very durable. It's a really stunning mount. I will finish up by mentioning an issue I noticed almost immediately. I use an Askar D-style or Losmandy dovetail plate, which came with my 151 PHQ, and it is larger than the average D-style dovetail plate. In fact, it is so large that you will not be able to tighten the dovetail saddle. The arms of the knobs that allow you to tighten the dovetail saddle will bump against the dovetail plate. This is really unfortunate, and I hope that Ioptron tweaks the design of those knobs and makes the stem about 3 mm longer. In the meantime, you can go to your local home center and purchase a couple of thick plastic washers, which can be used as spacers. As for me, I designed and 3D printed a spacer, and it works just fine. I'll put a link to the STL file in the description below. One last small detail. This mount can be controlled over Wi-Fi. It even ships with a little antenna that you can attach right here. This is a feature I would probably never use, but I wanted to mention it here just in case you might be interested. Now, if you looked at the Ioptron website, you probably noticed that they have many different versions of the HAE69 mount, 6 to be precise. I tried to figure out the differences between those versions, and to be honest, I found it a little confusing. If I were Ioptron, I would consolidate this lineup and have only 2 variants of this mount, one with and one without the high-resolution encoder in right ascension, because that encoder makes a pretty big difference to the sticker price. Everything else, like the iMate or the iPolar or the hand controller, should just be an optional accessory that people can decide to purchase separately. Anyway, this is just my opinion. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Alright, so it looks like the Ioptron HAE69C EC mount fits most of my requirements. It is not cheap at over $5,300 US for just the mount head, but it looks like a solid mount. That being said, the proof is in the pudding, so in the next video, which I will publish in a few weeks, we will take a closer look at this mount, and of course we will review its performance once I've had a chance to put it through its paces. So don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you don't want to miss that video. Also, if you enjoy this kind of content, please click on the affiliate links I put in the description below. It costs you exactly nothing, but if you happen to purchase something from Agena Astro in the next few weeks, I will get a tiny commission, and that really helps me put out more content. Also, I like the idea of supporting astronomy retailers like Agena Astro, because they work really hard behind the scenes to make astronomy equipment available to us at the best possible price. And they also work with small content creators like me, so it's a win-win. Also, feel free to join the Dark Sky Geek community Discord server, link in the description below, if you like to geek out on astronomy and astrophotography. Alright, thank you for watching until the end, and I'll see you next time.